This task is how you can use Excel or Google Sheets to convert scores to a different type of score or a different, like a curved score. If you have an equation to do that, that's great. But let's say it's like kind of a weird mapping, like often we find in IB. They'll map different ranges to different IB scores, and it's not really a pattern, so it's kind of hard to map them. And this would work for any weird mapping that they have. So let's say you got a class list, and the class list also has a second column that has the raw percentage score that the person got on the assessment, and you want to convert this into an IB score from 1 through 7. And let's say that from the IB guide you got a mapping of how that maps out. So you got how like a score of 0 maps to 1, a score of 19 maps to 2, a score of 35 maps to 3, etc. And like these borders between 2 and 3, for example, are defined like in your guide. Okay? And so you type this out. Remember, use the tricks from the first explanation so that you don't type everything out by hand. Use the power of Excel to make these predictable patterns multiply across the column. And so, okay, so I wanted to convert a 68 to whatever the mark is here. A 68 actually converts to a 5, and I could just type 5 in here, but I'm going to show you a way that you could do it for, like, let's say you have a list of 100 people and 100 scores. I'm going to show you a way you can do the conversions for 100 people in the same time it takes you to do one. Okay? So the way you do it is you use a function called VLOOKUP. And VLOOKUP actually stands for vertical lookup. And the reason why it's called vertical lookup is because you create a mapping like this one vertically. This is a vertical list. And I'm going to use the VLOOKUP function to convert the 68 into a 5. Okay? So the way I do that is I click on the space, the cell where I want the converted score to appear. I type equals because it's a function. I type VLOOKUP because that's the name of the function. Left parentheses because that's how I start giving it the parameters. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, which value needs to be converted? So I click on the 68, type comma. Then the next thing is, where does it find the mapping table? And it finds the mapping table here. And I am going to use the left mouse button to highlight the entire table. Go all the way to the end of the table. And then I type comma. And then it asks for where is the value that needs to be filled in. And the value that needs to be filled in is the second column, right? This 1 through 7 value is found in the second column relative to the table. So I'm going to type 2. And then the last column I'm going to put false. And the reason why I put false is because if anything doesn't match, it's only going to put in the number that matches exactly. Maybe that makes no sense, but just put false there. And then I've found out that 68 maps to 5, which I already knew. It's like, well, how does that help me? Well, the thing is, just by defining this function, now I can copy this function to all the other values with the cross and pulling down. Okay? There's one thing you need to be careful of. One of the great things about Excel and Google Sheets is whenever you copy this to others, it always uses what we call relative addressing. It figures out, like for example here, I'm referring to the 68, which is B5. When I come down here, I'm going to refer to B6. And when I come down here, I'm going to refer to B7. And when you copy this cell to all the other cells, Google Sheets and Excel does that automatically. It always assumes that you want what we call relative addressing, which is like instead of taking B5 always and calculating, putting here, it's going to take whatever's to the left of the cell. Okay, so if I copy the 5 down to here, then if I look here, then it says, oh, okay, instead of copying B5, I'm going to take B6 and do the calculation, which is fine. But the only problem is that when it uses relative addressing, let's click on this field here, and you can see which data we're using. You can see that we're using the 68, and we're using the table that we defined. The 68's in an orange dotted line rectangle, and the table is in a purple dotted line rectangle. right? Okay, hit enter. Then I'm going to do set. When I go to the 7, I'm going to click and do the same thing. Now you see there's a problem because now I'm using the 92, but now instead of using the table that I originally defined, they actually moved the table down by 1. And that's really bad because if I look down at the bottom, look at that. Now the table has like an empty line here, which is really screwed up. And so if you copy this down a bunch of times, what's going to happen is this little table keeps getting marked down, and then eventually you're going to not have the complete table. You're going to have the top of the table cut off. So how do you fix that? Okay, we're going to go back here to the beginning. And now when we define the table, we said the table goes from D5 to E105. Now it always needs to be D5 E105, no matter how far you go down. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell Excel or Google Sheets that we're not going to use relative addressing here. And the way we do that is we kind of freeze it by typing $ signs in between, in front of all these values that we don't want to change. We type $D, $5 instead of D5. And by doing this, and now we hit enter, by doing this, when we copy this cell all the way down, if we click on any one of these cells now, you can see that it's still D5 E105. So even though the orange cell became B11, you can see that the table ended up staying where it was supposed to because we said don't change the D, don't change the 5, don't change the E, don't change the 105 by putting dollars in front of those. You can also do that with the F4 function, but it might be easier to remember just the dollar. Okay, so that is kind of an advanced concept, but if you know how to do that, it really opens up a lot of possibilities for you with Excel. Okay, so I have now made the first column is the raw percentage, and the second column is the IB mark, and I've done all the conversions, and I can do that for 1 million people all at the same time. That's why it's powerful.